Hey everybody! Guess what happened? Steven Crowder decided to say something especially egregious today.
This is actually, really severe. I made up the things about the Jews. You're actually doing this.
There it is.
You're actually having 5-year-olds hand dollar bills into your panties and your Geisen?
Release the Jews and apologize.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is too much.
They make the Jews sign a treaty okay, listen, we will release you on the terms that you are now the Gestapo for all the drag events.
Yeah.
Friends, enemies, assorted potted plants. I am not here to talk to you about Steven Crowder. And that's because Crowder himself isn't all that important. We know who he is, we know his character, we know he says inflammatory things that border on literally advocating for violence. And I feel like if you're deep enough down the leftist YouTube rabbit hole that you're sitting there watching me, who has less than 3,000 subscribers and a tie-dye headband, talking about Steven Crowder and how much he sucks, then I don't need to tell you who Steven Crowder is. He needs no introduction. We know who we're talking about. I also feel like I shouldn't need to explain to you how Steven Crowder has frequently and repeatedly called for violence, both implicitly and explicitly. I made a video about one of those incidents not too long ago. Maybe go check that out if you're not too busy. So let's skip straight to the 202 stuff, which involves Crowder as little as possible. How he advocates for violence, why he hasn't been banned, and how maybe we can get him banned if we try really hard. Since we're all on the same page now, and since I'm assuming that my teddy bear over there managed to slide in that clip of Steven Crowder and his goons saying that, yeah, the Nazis were right, actually, I'm going to talk about why it matters that they keep advocating for violence. Minor sidebar before we start. If anyone suggests to you that Crowder is not advocating for violence when he says this, if anyone says to you that Crowder and his goons are not advocating for immediate violence against trans people when they say this, I feel compelled to remind you that Nazi Germany killed millions of people. Somewhere between 6 and 8 million civilians in the Holocaust, but let's not forget the civilians in Russia and the troops in Russia who were killed. Nazi Germany killed like a fifth of all of Russia at the time. Also, fun fact, Nazi Germany literally started on their bullshit with trans people. So if you, by chance, hear someone say that Steven Crowder and his goons are not advocating for violence, are not specifically advocating for violence against trans people in this clip, the polite thing to say to them would be that their opinion is not valid, it is not historically accurate, and it is not wanted, and they should probably leave. And the appropriate thing to say would be, get the fuck out! If you have 9 people sitting at a table and one of those people is a Nazi, then you have 10 Nazis sitting at a table. I'm just saying. Something that I feel like not enough people understand about Steven Crowder is that he is a goon. Goon is the wrong word. It has like a dozen meanings. What's a better word? Fall guy. Steven Crowder is the fall guy. When someone does something especially egregious, or things get really, really bad, and there's a big backlash, Steven Crowder is one of the guys that they're going to blame. Steven Crowder and other people of similar personalities and disposition, people like Alex Jones, people like Candace Owens, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, are not just pawns, they are sacrificial pawns. They are the people who will need to be removed from the board before the Republican Party can start moving their stronger pieces forward. To mix chess metaphors a little bit. Minor sidebar, to clarify a point, when I said Republicans just now, I did not mean elected Republican officials. Most elected Republican officials are also sacrificial pawns. What I meant was major Republican officials, both elected and unelected, and people who donate to the Republican Party in huge amounts, people like the Koch brothers. Well, I guess there's only one of them now. Those people are the people most responsible for the advance of fascism, even now. Those people are the people whose plans are being advanced and forwarded, even now. And those people are the people who stand to benefit the most if all of these wacky schemes go just the right way. It's the people on the right with the money. Actually, just people with money, more or less. Now, if you're a smart person, smarter than me, you're probably asking yourself, Ron, if Steven Crowder's purpose is to be caught up in a scandal and removed from the board, so to speak, then considering all the scandals that he's been caught up in, why hasn't he been removed from the board? The wonky answer for that is that the Republicans and their fascist allies are the only people at the party playing chess. The longer answer is that no one has forced the far right and their neo-lib allies to remove these people from the table. While there have been a handful of very high-profile people removed from the public square, people like Stevie Molyneux, people like Richard Spencer, people like Nick Fuentes, those are few and far between, and they are also the most egregious cases. It should also be noted that in some of those cases like Milo Yiannopoulos and Alex Jones, those people were not removed from the public square because of any far-right thing that they said, but because ordinary people became so fed up with their overly egregious nonsense that they forcibly removed them themselves. It's an interesting and disquieting phenomenon that people on the left of the US politics, left, are overly hesitant to remove any voice from the public square, no matter how fallacious they may be, no matter how egregious they may be, no matter how violent they may be. Part of it is an awareness of the old right-wing standby that if they're being silenced, they must be right, something that even Hitler used back in the day, but most of it, I think, is this entirely fictitious idea that the best ideas will be the ones that win in the end. You know, things like the Electoral College, things like neoliberal capitalism, things like mass incarceration. The best ideas! This leads to politicians and pundits on the left believing that they can convince people with facts and figures and numbers, when that's not even remotely how any of that works. Or, to put it another way, and repeat myself, the right wing are the only people at the table playing chess. But Steven Crowder especially has run very, very close. Back in 2019, when I had a more regular upload schedule, I remember there being a great big hullabaloo about Steven Crowder literally directing harassment towards Carlos Maza. I remember it being such a big deal that the corporate wing of the YouTube system had to clarify that yes, Steven Crowder had broken their rules of conduct, and no, he was not going to be punished for it. Minor sidebar, some pedants might argue that Steven Crowder was punished for his misbehaviors. He was prohibited from selling merchandise until he removed a very specific, very egregious piece of merchandise from his merchandise section. But that's not true. The offensive piece of merchandise was never removed, it was just packaged in a box. Steven Crowder faced no repercussions from YouTube, or anyone else as far as I know, for directing harassment at Carlos Maza, which, for someone as deep down the leftist YouTube rabbit hole as you are, should not come as a surprise. And yeah, a lot of people at the time immediately noticed that. And yeah, a lot of people at the time were really mad, including people who worked at YouTube. No one, as far as I know, was ever given an adequate explanation as to why Steven Crowder never faced repercussions. But last year, I did a bunch of research on the topic, and I think that I have an answer. It's about ad revenue. And we've been directing our efforts at the wrong people. So back in 2019, when Steven Crowder was in really hot water, a lot of the effort to remove Steven Crowder from YouTube was directed at the corporate wing of YouTube. More specifically, the CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcik. Wojcik? Is that how you pronounce her name? I don't care. On the surface, this makes sense. You pressure the corporate culture in order to change the corporate management, but in practice, that did not work and would not work because Steven Crowder was and is still a part of one of the biggest cash cows on YouTube, The Blaze. Blaze Media is owned and operated by one Glenn Beck. After Glenn Beck was fired from Fox News in 2011 for being too annoying and screechy, he told the people at Fox News that he was going to start his own news corporation, with more Christian ethno-nationalism and more conspiracy theories. And in fact, forget the news. And then he did just that, and was wildly successful, because the Tea Party was still a thing. I guess is still a thing, they just call themselves Trumpists now. One of the hallmarks of The Blaze is their, let's call it diversity of content. They've hosted shows from Gavin McGinnis, from Tommy Lauren, from The Duck Guy, and from Andrew WK, the party dude. But more pertinent to this conversation is the fact that The Blaze produces both Louder with Crowder and The Rubin Report, and that they frequently collaborate with Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager. And that matters because you have seen a pre-roll ad for PragerU. You have seen a pre-roll ad for the Daily Wire. I'm willing to bet that a lot of you have seen pre-roll ads for The Rubin Report. And you've probably seen an ad for Louder with Crowder. Those ads are not free. And in fact, just saying that they are not free obscures the point. Thousands, tens of thousands of people see these ads every day. That means that there are tens of thousands of these ads going at any time, maybe even more. I'm not usually a betting man, betting is a sucker's game, but I would be willing to bet this pen, the only thing my dad left me in his will, and the most valuable thing that I own, that the cost of all of those ads is at least 10 times the revenue that any of those companies makes from any ads that they put on their videos. Which is another way of saying that those ads are an important source of revenue for YouTube corporate. All of that is to say that going after the corporate wing of YouTube back in 2019 might have seemed like the most obvious idea, but it was bound to failure because Steven Crowder is part of a network of channels that are a cash cow for YouTube. Corporations are never going to risk their bottom line, and they are never going to risk disappointing their investors if they can help it. So, going after corporate, demanding that they do something in this instance, is not only less than useless, it just brings more attention to a problem that they can't fix. And we can acknowledge that these corporations, The Blaze, PragerU, the Daily Wire, are aware of their status as cash cows, and maintain that status specifically so that they can flaunt the rules if need be. But I have an idea. I have an idea that might work to get at least Steven Crowder thrown off of YouTube. And it's not to bug corporate, it's not to demand change from them, it's to demand change from The Blaze. Steven Crowder said some Nazi shit. Very explicitly, very deliberately. He even invoked the Nazis at the time. What we need to do is make the stink from that transfer from Steven Crowder to everyone associated with The Blaze. And that's easy to do. You go on social media and you ask people associated with The Blaze why they support a fucking Nazi. Glenn Beck clearly believes that the violent extermination of trans people is an absolute necessity. Why else would he employ someone who claims the same? Hey, Dave Rubin, how does it feel knowing that the people who are paying you now are the people who are saying that they're going to put you in concentration camps in a couple of years? Man, Destroy, Build, Destroy was such a good show. I just wish the host wasn't a fascist. Is that how you do that? Remember, the goal of the thing is not necessarily to be truthful or honest. We're in full-on post-truth here. The goal of the thing is to get the stink of Crowder and what he has done on the rest of The Blaze. And the idea is that if The Blaze receives enough backlash from Steven Crowder and his antics, Glenn Beck will just fire him. Glenn Beck owns The Blaze. He can just fire Steven Crowder at any time. And when Steven Crowder has been removed from The Blaze, he can be safely removed from YouTube because he is no longer a part of that massive conservative cash cow. He can be removed from the board without provoking a threat. To mix chess metaphors. Now, am I going to 100% guarantee that this will work? Of course I'm not. That would be wildly fucking irresponsible. I do not want you to walk away from this video believing that I have constructed a foolproof method of removing someone from YouTube who has advocated for the extermination of trans people. I have not. What I have done, what I have hopefully done, is explained why former efforts to do this have not worked in the past, and come up with a new method that might work in future. If the far right is over here playing chess, and everyone else is over here playing nothing, then the far right is going to win every time. That's something that we've seen. That's something that we can observe. We are not going to beat the far right by ignoring the chessboard that they've set up. Not when they have invested so much into it. We are going to beat them one of two ways. We are either going to play chess better than them, or we're going to break the chessboard. And right now, I'm advocating for playing chess better than them. Not because I think that that will work in the long run, but because this is a fight, a small fight, that we can win.